And what is the situation like at the moment?
It's hell.
I'm sure by now you've seen that India is currently suffering from an unprecedented surge in coronavirus cases and, importantly, deaths. So what is actually going on? Now, obviously, that's a huge question, and I'm not going to try to cover everything. This video is primarily intended as a fundraiser, so please watch, learn about the situation. If you want to read more, I'll put some links below, but most importantly, if you can, please help. For those new to the channel, I was born in India. I came to the UK as a kid. Much of my family, as well as all of my wife's family, are there, and we visit every year, or at least we used to. And I'm ashamed to say that I believed the happy narrative that India had beaten COVID. Bizarrely, the first thing that alerted me to something going wrong was Indian Twitter accounts that I follow amplifying desperate-sounding tweets from individuals struggling to get medical help and in their hour of need turning to the internet. So I wanted to say something, as I'm aware that there aren't that many medical YouTubers with my background, but I've probably watched this whole situation unfold in India the same way you have, in stunned disbelief. And I'm afraid I've been kind of paralyzed into shocked inactivity until yesterday, when I remembered that I had this YouTube channel and I wondered what I could add. I wasn't sure what to say, so I asked you, and I got lots of really good suggestions. I can't do them all, so I've decided to focus on the following. Number one, a basic outline of what's going on. I'm not going to try to replicate the news. I'm slow to upload these and edit them, so I'll be out of date. So do check the news for the latest, but I'll do a bit of a too long didn't watch to bring you up to speed. Number two, why this matters to you, no matter where you are in the world. This isn't an Indian problem, it's a world problem. Number three, why and how India has become the global epicenter, especially as it was apparently doing so well just quite recently. Could this have been avoided, or is this simply inevitable when you're dealing with a country of 1.3 billion people? And specifically, I want to ask about what scientific missteps might have occurred and whether this represents a deeper problem with Indian culture and society. Number four, we're going to hear from some people directly from the coalface. I'll have some advice for those watching from India, and finally, how you can help. It's probably going to be a long video, so I'll put some timestamps. I'll start with an email that I received. Hello, Rohin. I work in New Delhi in a government setup. My job is to manage admissions, ward rounds, and COVID treatment. My hospital is overcrowded, nearly 2 in a bed. Worst part about it is that you have to say no to patients when the hospital is at full occupancy. We've never been so inhuman before. So many days we've cried after our shift. We receive calls over the whole day to inquire about patient status, and worst is being unable to even drink a sip of water in nearly 2 hours per shift. At the end of each day, I'm so tired and exhausted. Before you recover from that, the phone starts ringing and you need to reply. You never know who needs help at that point in time. Things are out of control now. Yes, obviously numbers are too low, as many die at home or on the way to hospital due to failure of the system. That was in response to a question I asked about whether this doctor felt that the published numbers were undercounts. The healthcare system of India is the biggest failure. All we fight is for caste and creed, mosque and temples. I wish we could have fought for hospitals and doctors. Then the world would have been a different place now. I hope people start realizing what is important for them after this pandemic is over. Other countries have had second waves, but India's numbers really just leave you bewildered. It's been described as a wall or a tsunami rather than a wave. Mass funeral pyres are burning the dead in their hundreds on a daily basis. You often have to wait days, and for communities that normally bury their deceased, families are waiting days for that, or the burial grounds are completely full and they're having to cremate their dead. There are inadequate storage facilities, and at the time of recording this, almost 400,000 cases were reported in a single day, and that's projected to go up, the highest in the world by a mile. Critically unwell patients are being turned away from hospitals, which are already full well beyond their capacity. There's simply not enough oxygen, which has completely run out in many places, and there isn't the capacity or the logistics to replenish it fast enough, nor is there enough staff to treat everyone. A particularly alarming feature is that many much younger patients are being affected now, possibly as they're the ones who've been going out and working and mixing again, or possibly related to some of the new variants that we're seeing. As we've seen in every other country, COVID affects the poor to a far greater extent, and perhaps India shows this more starkly than anywhere else. It has world-class, super modern hospitals that make even where I work look old-fashioned, but it's public hospitals that provide care free are criminally neglected and underfunded, getting around 1% of GDP compared to about 8 to 15% for most modern countries. Those served by these hospitals often live in overcrowded slums where social distancing is nigh on impossible. The peak of this wave is still several weeks away, according to Indian virologists and epidemiologists, not least because mass gatherings, and when I say mass, I don't mean a few thousand people, I mean mass, this is India after all, but more on that later, are still happening. Here are the words of Devi Shetty, who is a cardiac surgeon and pretty much a household name in India. Patients are dying in ICU because there are no nurses and doctors is going to be the headline news after we address the oxygen shortage. Based on data from the first COVID wave, positivity rate should remain at around 25 to 30% for the next 3 to 4 months. Every day over 300,000 people are testing positive. Statistically, for every positive patient, there will be at least 5 more patients who are positive but not tested. That means at least 1.5 million people are being infected every day. Assuming that 5% of them may need ICU care, we'll be adding around 75,000 ICU patients every day who need to stay in the ICU for about 10 days. Unfortunately, we only have 75 to 95,000 ICU beds nationwide, which were full even before the pandemic reached the peak. Today, our own intensivists aren't sure whether they will get a bed in the same ICU where they're working if they get infected. Unlike the first wave, ICUs today are getting filled with younger patients, so most of the patients who die are going to be young breadwinners of their families with devastating social implications. It's important to rewind to the beginning to get some context here. Last year, when India's cases were pretty low, Prime Minister Narendra Modi announced a full, strict lockdown, which was praised by many outside observers as forward-thinking. But it was done with just 4 hours notice. Now, India is a vast country with millions of internal migrant workers and an enormous informal economy that keeps the country afloat. These daily wage laborers, as they're known, were suddenly stranded, often thousands of kilometers from home. The human and economic cost was catastrophic. There's no safety net for these people. Without income or shelter, they were unable to eat. Many thousands died attempting to walk home. They had no savings to draw upon. Those that eventually made it home from the urban areas to their villages, of course, took the virus with them. So lockdown had exacted a terrible cost amongst the poor, but to the enormous middle class, a primary source of votes in forthcoming elections, it appeared to be a great success. And just 2 months ago, India seemed to have incredibly low infection rates. There were articles from within and without remarking on how India had got it right and seemed to have emerged with minor losses. Indian social media circulated videos of the UK and the US being ravaged by the virus, and Indians felt proud to have done so much better than these rich countries, and who can blame them? But these were desperately premature. Another email. The situation is very bad. Yesterday, many people died on the steps of my hospital. I could not let them in. Oxygen is being sold on the black market. My professor is himself in hospital. My mother, hypoxic, at home, low oxygen levels, and 2 in my family have succumbed. We have no vaccines for 2 days now. We cannot say publicly of oxygen shortage. Our chief minister is forbidding any flagging of the shortage. Why does this matter to you? The majority of whom aren't even in India. The most obvious reason is that the world is linked, a perfect breeding ground for mutations, just like occurred in Brazil, although arguably this is much worse now, doesn't stay contained inside man-made borders. We're already seeing variant strains spread across the world with breathtaking speed, which I really didn't get until I realized a lot of flights are still happening and have been throughout the pandemic. The more variants there are, the longer the pandemic takes to control. But there are more direct effects for millions of people. In the West, we've got a tendency to look down or at least ignore the dynamics of much of the world, especially when it comes to healthcare. India supplies much of the world's generic drugs and 60% of the world's vaccines. It's the largest producer of COVID vaccines too. It was supposed to be delivering those vaccines to many parts of the developing world, especially Africa. In 3 months, India exported 64 million doses. In April, only 1.2 million, as domestic demand skyrocketed and exports were halted. The international COVAX vaccine sharing scheme was meant to get 140 million doses from India's Serum Institute, the biggest manufacturer of vaccines in the world. That seems very unlikely now for quite some time. First, New variants. India has seen two double mutant variants emerge, as well as currently unconfirmed a triple mutant strain as well. There's no doubt that these have made it worse, maybe not necessarily by making the infection worse, but by making it more transmissible or more able to evade vaccines. We know that the Brazilian and South African variants are able to evade vaccine-derived immunity, and the British variant is significantly more transmissible. And all the main mutant strains from other countries have been detected in India too. In fact, it's believed that the main Indian mutant variant rampaging through the country now originated in Kent, here in England. There's a reason we don't have Australian or Kiwi or Taiwanese mutant variants, because these are not countries where the virus was circulating widely. In countries with high infection rates, the virus replicates more and more and has more chance to mutate, so it's no surprise that India is giving rise to its own mutations. However, the effect of all of these mutations is probably not that high in comparison to other, much more avoidable factors. Variants were seen in India a few months ago, but medics were still saying continue to wear masks and socially distance. Yet the government ignored this advice, and Prime Minister Narendra Modi told the World Economic Forum that India had defeated the virus, and the health minister said we're in the end game in March. And how I wish he was announcing a Bollywood Avengers remake, but instead he was proudly proclaiming that the virus was ending. Now this is an example of the Indian government's rejection of science that's going to crop up several times in this video. It certainly doesn't make them unique. Indeed, I'd say that national governments ignoring scientists has been the norm for the last year. But in India's case, it's a worrying trend that we've seen long before this pandemic. I've got a list of video ideas in a Google Doc. It's well over 200 ideas long now. And one that I've had from the very early days of this channel was based on a stand-up gig that I gave at the Science Museum in London, which was about Indian science. And it was entitled something like, India, What Went Wrong? Pretty prophetic, huh? And I was asking how a country that has produced some of the world's greatest scientists and mathematicians, a country whose national cliche is being a highly educated engineer or a doctor, is still so deeply anti-science. And while many of these tendencies have always been there in our culture, the government really leading the charge against science has gotten a lot worse in recent years, with the current government heavily promoting quack therapies such as cow urine and homeopathy. They promoted a fringe group into a full-blown government department, the Ministry of Ayush, or Ayurveda, Yoga, Naturopathy, Unani, Siddha, Sowarigpa, I don't know what that is, and homeopathy. They've even managed to whip up nationalistic fervour, claiming that Western science is inferior to Indian systems, which rather ignores the fact that homeopathy is German, and we've had to endure the Indian government saying more and more far-fetched things. As a brief aside, India doesn't allow dual citizenship. I'm a British citizen, I have no vote in India, I've got no political affiliation there, and frankly, no love for any Indian politician. And I have to say this because, rather analogous to criticising Trump, fans of Modi simply dismiss any negative comments as being due to political reasons. Again, similarly to Trump, Modi was elected by a large populist movement, but in his case by a massive landslide. The problem with being a populist, though, is you have to do popular things, not necessarily correct things. And in a pandemic, often the right thing to do is not that popular. Boris Johnson felt the same pressure to allow families to meet up last Christmas, in spite of the UK suffering a nasty second wave. Trump and Bolsonaro revelled in huge rallies in their honour, and because elections are occurring in several states in India right now, Modi allowed massive campaign rallies and events to take place until just last week, rejoicing, I've never seen such large crowds at one of the rallies, along with allowing weddings, sporting fixtures, and the Kumbh Mela. The Kumbh is the biggest meeting of human beings in the world. It's a Hindu festival that happens once every 12 years. Now, you've seen the desperation Japan has to let the 4-yearly Olympics take place. This is 3 times less frequent and has the additional layer of religion to give it special status, especially in India, a country that is still deeply religious at every level, because obviously the virus observes local religious sensibilities. It's very kind not to spread during Christmas in the UK or during the Kumbh in India. Good guy Corona. The Kumbh has been going on for several weeks now. It's ending around now. And Indian news reports almost no masks being worn. Estimates put the number of people meeting per day and bathing in the same water in close proximity without social distancing at 1 million from all over the country. I've always wanted to go to the Kumbh. It's a spectacle unlike anything on Earth. But it is the super spreader event to end all super spreader events, the mother viral load. The government dared not cancel it for fear of enraging the masses that vote for them and the powerful Hindu groups that represent their core. Indeed, Modi wished people a happy Kumbh and to enjoy themselves. So why did India open up again after it had done so well? Well, because it had done so well. People became complacent. They engaged in magical thinking that Indians have a particular immunity to this virus, that herd immunity had been achieved, that the hot weather had been crucial, that the Indian vegetarian diet protected them. These are all real things I read, not from politicians, although they may have repeated them, but from government scientists. How? Well, it's our old friend, confirmation bias. Everyone was so caught up in the victory over the virus, they ignored anything that didn't fit their narrative. It probably wasn't even deliberate, hence it's a cognitive bias. The one group that tried to sound the alarm, the same group that have been ignored in pretty much every country, was doctors at the coalface. They said cases are rising in January and February, but government scientists ignored the data points that didn't fit with the trajectory they had predicted, and it didn't suit the agenda. The English cricket team were coming to tour India, and a brand new Narendra Modi Stadium had been built and needed to be inaugurated, and you can't do that without a big match and a crowd, right? The story of India and science in the modern era is sometimes said to start with India's first Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru, who talked of the scientific temper of the Indian people. He promoted STEM subjects as a way for India to build as a nation and to achieve financial stability. And as you all know, Indian parents tend to guide their children towards science subjects. But instead of generating a true inquisitive scientific temperament, India is now a production line for science graduates with incredible memorization abilities for exams, but little in the way of critical thinking. So I can't criticize politicians alone when you have senior government scientists with PhDs proclaiming with complete seriousness that India invented head transplants and powered flight millennia ago because it's evidenced in the Hindu texts. In the COVID era, the nonsense that they spout has become lethal. As they've said, mouthwash, turmeric, cow's urine can cure COVID. Hydroxychloroquine was embraced in India despite never being shown to help. Remdesivir and convalescent plasma have found their way into Indian guidelines despite the former showing such weak effects at such a high price it was abandoned in the West and advised against by the WHO, and the latter being clearly demonstrated to be ineffective by, amongst others, the recovery trial. Ivermectin, zinc, vitamin D, the Indian authorities seem to have taken their cues from YouTubers and Facebook posts spouting pet theories and conspiracies instead of actual studies. Just because some bloke online assures you that something works, that's not evidence. Now, maybe this isn't so surprising. I once asked an Indian doctor whether he's okay with the Ministry of Ayush promoting pseudoscience alongside his own evidence-based approach, and he explained that the government allow this to happen and actually encourage it because it is a cheap way to pretend that people are receiving healthcare. It's much easier than, say, building a hospital and training doctors and nurses. Allow the quacks to mop up a lot of the work and keep the public happy. So in the same way, by promoting unproven but obtainable treatments for COVID, they were appeasing the angry masses. Let them eat 500 milligrams of cake twice a day after meals. Another victim of India's complacency was the vaccine rollout. Like any other person with Indian roots, it was a source of great pride for me that India was supplying the world with vaccines as gifts to all its neighbours and other developing countries. But what was less clear until I spoke to relatives was that people were not taking up vaccines that were on offer. As we've come to expect everywhere, vaccine misinformation is rife in India. While not as virulent as in America or France, for example, there were enough headlines to convince the average person that the vaccine had unpleasant side effects, and faced with a pandemic that the Prime Minister says is pretty much over, I would hardly blame someone for deciding to take their chances without a vaccine that might make them feel lousy. I've had endless WhatsApps with concerns about the AstraZeneca vaccine, then about a locally produced vaccine called Covaxin, and as a result, only 10% of Indians are vaccinated. In America, Joe Biden invoked a surprisingly protectionist wartime law to prevent export of raw materials required from vaccine manufacture, delaying Indian vaccine production further. He only relented in the last few days under a lot of pressure, both domestically and internationally. The doctors and nurses in Delhi's hospitals rarely go home, eating, sleeping, and if they're lucky, resting where they work, he said. When they do, it is often to self-isolate after having contracted COVID-19. Some come back only to be admitted as patients themselves. Our doctors are going through hell, and the rest of us ought to be extremely grateful. Dr. Pushkar is a junior doctor in Nagpur, which is pretty much bang in the middle of India, and he very kindly agreed to appear on camera.
What is the situation like at the moment?
It's hell, and that's an understatement, because there are no beds available anywhere. At least my city of Nagpur is is very well known for its hospitals and medical care in general. But there are no beds here. People are dying here because they are not getting beds. They are not getting the treatment they need. As a doctor, it's a very sad situation to see, because and you feel so helpless, and it's very disheartening, so to say. To say that it's hell out there is an understatement, and that's the best I can describe it.
Can you describe a typical day for you at the moment? What does a shift look like?
So basically, we have 12-hour shifts. 12-hour. There is one 12-hour shift and two 6-hour shifts. That's our normal COVID rotation. That happens. We lack manpower, so sometimes it happens that the ones who are at night have to continue in the morning shift also.
Wow.
So
okay.
basically that 12-hour duration gets stretched by 6 more hours.
And you're doing the whole shift in full PPE, I assume.
Not the full PPE, not the 18 hours, but most of it, like around 6 to 8 hours, give or take.
Wow.
Okay. So we do that in PPE. There's a lot of paperwork too, but that's a minor thing.
Are there more than one patient per bed at the moment, or
in the casualty? Yes, in the casualty. In the wards, at least we manage to have one bed per patient. But where the triage take place, the casualty area, you have 4 patients per bed.
Wow.
And I just I just saw a patient who had to spend 4 days in casualty because there were no beds. 4 days in casualty area. Then on the 5th day he got a bed, but by then his situation became so bad that the next day of getting a bed he passed away, and that guy was below 40 years of age. The thing is that we had time. Our governments had time, from the local government, the state government, the central government. We had time to prepare, but we didn't prepare that much. In general, the treatment of doctors, we are not treated as good as we have heard in other countries, basically. Yeah. So the treatment of doctors is very bad, so to say.
Have you seen a lot of patients dying?
Yes, actually. Currently, I just said that I'm working in forensic medicine. So basically, I have to go sometimes to the mortuary too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in mortuary, I'll tell you to put things in context. Last week there was one particular day. I don't know if it was a Thursday or a Friday, but pre-COVID, our record for most bodies being post-mortem or most bodies being dispatched to the relatives, it was 25, and that was the most. Last week, it was 104.
My goodness.
Yes, and on an average, we are dispatching around 75 bodies. That's average.
What do you think is the main reason why it's so bad in India, after India was doing quite well before and the case numbers were low? Why do you think it's changed so much?
Well, there are many factors. I'll say, but you must be knowing about Kumbh Mela, no? So basically, what happened is I'm in Nagpur, so it's means Kumbh Mela is not happening near my region, but where it's happening, it's not properly enforced, and social distancing is not means they say that social distancing will be followed and everything will be done, but that hasn't been done at all. And when there were cases increasing, the government did not enforce to contain it or to call it an end to that procession.
Yeah.
And then there were other big things that were allowed to happen, like the rallies, like the election rallies in Bengal. So there are many things like that contributed to this. When you go to the northern parts of India, where basically the Kumbh is right now in under process, you can say that the cases are being underreported and deaths are being underreported. Means basically people are covering up, and that leads to people being in a false sense of security. So because of that, it's increasing more right now.
With so many hospitals overflowing, of course patients with any disease are being affected. In a country where thousands die on a daily basis from infectious disease such as malaria, TB and diarrheal illnesses that would have depended on those government hospitals, the collateral damage is also going to be unimaginable. Dr. Pushkar bravely went on the record. You've already heard 2 anonymized emails I've received. In fact, I've got a lot more than that, but all requested that their identities were removed because the government is clamping down on dissent like never before. China tends to beat India in every metric these days, but a free press and democracy were always liberties that I felt were worth it. And yet now hospitals are being censored for talking about the situation, and Twitter agreed to remove dozens of critical tweets from some pretty high-profile Twitter accounts under pressure from the Indian government, which is a new step, in my opinion. Many international publications have also been criticized by the Indian government and their legion of online warriors for spreading lies. So who knows, maybe this video will get taken down. So what's next? India needs to hugely scale up vaccine production. Vaccines will be available to over 18s pretty soon, but there simply aren't enough at the moment. Even vaccinating around 3 million a day as it's doing now means the whole country will take over a year to vaccinate once. Remember, 2 doses are needed for all but one of the vaccines. Testing appears to have become significantly harder to obtain now. Whether that is deliberate or not, I can't comment, but ordinarily mass testing and isolation would be key. I just wonder if in a country with India's economy and societal structure, whether that would even ever be possible. So all hopes are really on vaccines. And confusingly, the approach now has switched from centrally provided free vaccines to states having to purchase their own supplies and then sell on to patients. So patients will have to pay, and who do you think is going to lose out once again? Of course, the poor. India is also not in a national lockdown at the moment, but the central government has told local governments, state governments, that they are free to do their own thing, rather absolving themselves of responsibility, and Delhi and Mumbai currently are in local lockdown. I wish I had more to say to those of you in India. It's tempting to reach for something, anything, in desperation, but please don't waste your time and money trying to source unproven therapies like remdesivir, ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, or plasma. The advice remains the same as it's always been. Stay at home, stop mixing, try not to be indoors with others except your immediate circle, wear a mask in public, and be meticulous with hand washing and avoiding touching your face. Misinformation is a plague on India, and anytime you receive a WhatsApp with something claiming to be a miracle cure, please just take a look online, have a look around, and I guarantee 99% of them will be complete nonsense. For those of you outside India, you can help. I feel very fortunate to be here in the UK, several weeks on from my second vaccine dose, with a health system that's near normal, and certainly my work is getting much more back to normal at the moment. So I've been looking for charities and NGOs that I could donate to. I've put a link to a list below, but I've highlighted 3 that seem to come up repeatedly when I was asking around about who is reliable and doing good work, and they are Khalsa Aid, the Hemkund Foundation, and the link hopefully attached to this video, Give India's COVID Appeal. Please give whatever you can. Rich countries in the world have taken a long time to wake up to what's going on in India, and to be honest, I don't even blame them that much. We've all emerged from lockdowns in our own countries, economically severely affected, and can feel brighter days coming ahead, and it's kind of natural to want to bury your head in the sand and ignore what's happening in India because things are better domestically. But I hope I've explained that this isn't a problem that will stay in India, and due to its role supplying the world with vaccines, providing help will benefit far more countries than just India alone. According to Our World in Data, barely any Africans have been vaccinated so far. So the support of developed countries is not just desirable, it's essential for the rest of the world. The former Archbishop of Canterbury, Rowan Atkinson, yesterday said future generations will condemn the richest countries if they don't use their power to make vaccines universally available. Even if you're not in a position to donate and all you can do is tell others, share this video, tweet about the situation, everything helps. Your government might be sluggish like mine was. The UK's first aid flight with 100 ventilators and 95 oxygen concentrators just arrived today, but governments do cave to public pressure if enough people make a fuss. Sometimes. And even old enemies like China and Pakistan have agreed to provide aid to India, which further heaps shame onto Modi's government. So what lessons can we learn in other countries from all of this? The simple message is that complacency can kill. Opening up too early, going from 0 to 100 instead of a slow, phased opening with adequate testing and vaccinating undoes all of the hard work. I'll probably stop there. Let me know if there are other things that I should cover. A big thank you to my contributors from India especially. Huge respect to all the frontline workers in India, and hats off to the volunteers doing what they can, like groups of students using social media to find hospital beds and oxygen for those in need. Everybody's trying to do their bit there, and I'm thinking of you all.